Welcome to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. I'm Don Glanden, Director of Graduate Jazz Studies. Each year we welcome to our campus leading thinkers, composers, and performers to present master classes and interact with our students. March the 20th, 2019 was a special day and one of the highlights of our Masterclass series as we welcomed Aaron Parks to our campus. It was a pleasure speaking with Aaron about his views about music education, his years growing up in Seattle, and we discussed the impact of an artist's worldview on their creative output. Please join me as we welcome Aaron Parks.
Well, that's something new that I'm working on right now. Very lullaby-like in many ways, and also very hard. So, yeah, I figured maybe we can, I guess, start by like sitting down, talking a little bit, do some question and answer.
Just so everybody gets to know you a little bit, I was been looking at this amazing bio and found out that you were born in California, but moved to Seattle at a very young age and grew up there. And then you ended up in college at 15, 14?
Yeah, something like that.
As a triple major?
Yeah, that was crazy.
Math, computer science,
computers,
music.
and music. Yeah, I started at 14,
Wow.
and then I ended up, like around the time I was 15 or so, music started to really take over as just the thing that it became clear that that's what I wanted to do. And then, yeah, I ended up transferring to Manhattan School of Music when I was 16.
Okay, and what was your home life like in order to get you to that level of involvement in those areas? Were your parents musicians? Or?
My parents listened to a lot of music. My mom used to play some French horn, and my dad used to play some guitar. They didn't play a lot growing up. There was a piano in the house, and I just played around on it, you know, playing some stuff that definitely sounds like basically improvisations inspired by the sounds of the thunderstorms that were nearby, you know? So crashing thunder down in the low register, and the sound of lightning, whatever that is, that's not really a thing. But I was trying to do the sound of lightning as well, even though that actually is just the thunder. So I was trying to do that up top and a whole bunch of stuff. Definitely sounded a lot closer to a Cecil Taylor world than any of the ways that I typically play now.
Yeah, I listened to the Piano Jazz
yeah.
interview from 2001.
Oh, yeah.
And you talk about that, you know,
Yeah.
the early exercises in your imagination.
Yeah.
What about idiomatically? When did you first hear jazz, and when did that come into the picture?
So jazz came into the picture for me, well, pretty much after doing that stuff with I called that storm cycle piece, which was improvised and different every time. But I did that for a while, and then my parents were like, okay, how about some lessons? You know, I think just mostly to spare their ears as well. And I was very lucky because the first teacher that I ended up meeting with was from the beginning, and this is something that I had in common with almost all my teachers, which I'm very lucky in this regard. My teacher was like, well, what are you interested in? Rather than being like, here's what you need to know. My teacher asked me what was important for me and what did I want to do. And even at 10, I was like, well, I really like making things up. You know, I like making things up on the piano. She's like, well, the style of music in which that's the most common, especially in America, is jazz. And so she started to introduce me to it. And the first song that I ever learned was In the Mood by Glenn Miller. You know, boo-ba-doo, boo-ba-doo, boo-ba. That was the first thing I learned to play. And having learned to play that one tune, I think I was maybe 11 or something like that, maybe 12, yeah. I had learned to play this one tune. I heard about a youth jazz ensemble that was happening in downtown Seattle, or my mom heard about it, I'm sure. And I sent in my audition tape, which was just me playing that one song that I knew. And somehow I got in, because I didn't know how to read music or any other tunes or anything. All I knew was how to play this one song. And so every week I would go, and I was in the big band. I was like the piano player in the big band. Luckily, that's a very luxurious, like a not particularly necessary role in a lot of, I could sort of get away with being a Count Basie kind of style piano player. The charts take care of themselves, and the piano is mostly like the filigree on top for the charts that we were doing at that time. But even still, I would come in every week, and I would have 4 more bars that I had learned of whatever tune it was, and then I would just sit there for the rest of the time. I'd work with my teacher on like 4 or 8 more measures and then just sit there for the rest of the tune because I didn't know how that went yet. So it was not particularly fast going at first, I'll say that. But yeah, gradually with time, I had some other teachers who were really great. I found a teacher in Seattle. People started to turn me on to different music, So at first, the first thing that I was way into at the very beginning, which I still love, my first piano hero was Gene Harris. My first piano, Gene Harris, and then from there, I went to Gene Harris with the Ray Brown Trio, then all the other versions of the Ray Brown Trio, like with the younger piano players like Benny Green and Jeff Keezer. Like those were, I listened to those religiously. And definitely grew up with my approach with jazz was like, it's gotta be swinging. Very dogmatic in that approach. But also, I'm not mad at that at all. I love swinging music, and I'm glad, and I still spend a lot of time, even if a lot of the things that I do now aren't necessarily swinging in that traditional sense. It's super important, and for me, having some grounding in just in early listening was really key.
Yeah. So. We were talking about one thing I like to get into because all of these students are obviously in the middle of a formal jazz program,
right?
And sort of the evolution of jazz education in the country, and how that there's a generational kind of perception of that because you had to be a classical major early on,
right?
And then we had this transitional thing with North Texas and Berkeley, and now there's people who come initially to be part of a jazz program as undergrads. And we were talking about our common experience with Kenny Barron. So when you left for New York, you were around 16?
I was 16 when I got to New York.
And Kenny was your teacher at Manhattan?
Kenny was my teacher at Manhattan, yeah.
So he's some kind of hybrid of a formal education and a bandstand education, because when you're in those lessons, you're just playing on 2 pianos with him the entire lesson.
The entire lesson. It was actually one of the best educations that I could have imagined with the least amount of words spoken. You would come into a lesson with Kenny, and usually, at least for me, after the first lesson, he made it clear that if I came in and he was already playing a tune, he was going to keep playing that tune. I didn't, so we met the first time, and he's like, yeah, mostly I like to just play 2 pianos. From then on, most of the time that I came in, he was already in the middle of playing a tune solo piano. And he was just using it as his practice time as well.
Yeah.
And then I learned that what was expected of me was, if I knew the tune, I should join. If I didn't know the tune, I should walk around, check out what he was doing, or try to play along and try to figure it out. Just like learning by doing, actually, rather than learning by talking. In general, I can hardly remember much of anything that he said to me except for one specific comment, one that really stuck out to me. I remember after a good, somewhere 4, 5, 6 months of working together, me learning all these tunes, many of which was so super helpful, just for ear training, just having somebody playing a tune and you having to figure it out on the fly. That's one of the best ways to improve your ears, And after the months of doing this, so I was on my way out the door, and he was like, "All right, I'll see you next week, man." And I was like, "Yeah, see you. Thanks so much, Kenny." And he's like, "Oh, by the way, you should think about your touch." Like, he didn't tell me what to think about my touch. He didn't say, "This is how you should play the piano." He just like gave me this tiny little seed of a question and left me with it for me to do the work with it. And for me, that was really huge, to have someone be like, "Yeah, think about what you actually want your sound on the piano to be," you know? And that's a question that, you can keep on coming back to over a lifetime.
Yeah, there's no way he was ever going to show you a voicing or a phrase.
No way.
So we look at the tension between teaching very specific kinds of vocabulary kinds of things, or the teacher that is only going to give you broad conceptual things and let you discover. And he was
Right.
definitely of the latter.
He was of the latter, while also like, just, he wasn't going to give you a voicing, but he was going to play it for you many times. And and if you were there to check it out, like the information was right there,
Yeah.
But he definitely wasn't going to spell it out for you. It felt like as you said, a different generational, like just an old school oral tradition kind of thing.
Yeah, and the fact that swing and feel is so important to you, to
Oh,
be
yeah.
immersed in that.
Oh, big time.
Because he's the king of that.
Oh, totally.
So I'm thinking of maybe some other influences
For sure.
if we get to, were there any particular albums, Keith Jarrett or Herbie albums or Chick albums that influenced
Sure.
you?
I mean, as a young kid, there were a lot. I mean, so after Gene Harris phase, like I think my next obsession was McCoy Tyner. I went into a just heavy McCoy phase, and if you ever come across, they're out there. I'm afraid to report, like my very early albums from when I was like 15 or so, that had no business being made, but they exist and they're on the internet. I don't know why I'm telling you that, because now you can all find it. Some of it is really like, from my perspective now, it's kind of blackmail material, but you can definitely hear the McCoy influence pretty strong in there. There was a lot of McCoy, and yeah, there was a lot of Chick, there was a lot of Herbie, and there was a lot of Keith. So
What Keith?
Well, Keith was an interesting one for me, because I think that was my first live piano trio concert that I ever saw, was the Keith Jarrett Trio in Seattle at Benaroya Hall. My teacher that I had been studying with in Seattle had recommended that I go to this concert. He didn't really tell me much about it. He was either hip enough or foolish enough to not give me any warning about his vocalizations. And I mean, me being 11 or 12, I was mostly, I think, well, I don't know if I was I was really confused about what to make, because he was gyrating so wildly, and it like kind of seemed a little X-rated at times. When I was like, wow, I don't quite feel comfortable watching this. And then there were also the sounds that he made, both the vocalizations, but also the sound from the piano, and just a feeling from that concert that stuck with me, that I was like, this feels really like very profoundly like deep, real improvising, like creating something really from the ground up in a moment, even though, playing standards, but it just, all the lines felt fresh. I'm like, I can sort of trace it, but it just felt like something that really had come from the moment. Yeah, I think after McCoy, probably Keith was the next big influence that I went really deep into. Then I explored a lot of the whole a whole bunch of different people have had their time, like their moments that I've gone way deep. Some of them came way later than others. Like my fascination with Bud Powell didn't start until I was like maybe 28 or 29. I'm only still, like, I mean, I've always loved Barry Harris, but I only really dig Barry Harris, or I'm hip enough to dig Barry Harris as I get a little bit older, you know?
I was just wondering that first Keith album, the first solo album, Facing You.
Yeah.
I always thought was an important album, coupled with Chick Piano Improvisations 1 and 2, as sort of a resurgence of solo playing.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I didn't listen to Facing You a ton until many years later. I really had listened a lot to the Standards Trio, and then I listened to some of the other solo things, like the later, like Sun Bear concerts, and then Radiance when that came out. And I also made a habit of going to the Keith solo piano concerts when they would come through New York. You know, I was lucky enough to be at some of those, including one that was released as the Carnegie Hall concert. And almost every time that I went to one of those shows, I was just left with this feeling of like really profound emotion and awareness, and something was going on that felt like more than just the music. And I mean, including a time a couple of years ago, I went to see, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that I went to see him. And it was a concert that honestly, we won't, but I could spend the rest of this Masterclass talking about it, just because it was the most perplexing and bewildering experience. He, at the beginning of the concert, made a disclaimer saying that he was tired of harmony, and also he was bored with everything except for like dissonance and friction, and was trying to like play a game where anytime he played something familiar, he wanted to get out of there. Wow. And so he made this statement to the audience and then launched into definitely, I mean, coming from, I've heard other piano players who play very interesting and really like sort of avant-garde kinds of things. But from him, this was a sort of unique point of view, and and for me, it was a wildly successful first half of an experiment. That then, after the intermission, it seemed like he lost confidence in that, and then came back out and played everybody the pretty ballads that they wanted to hear, but with a lot of bitterness. So it was a really. I mean, to the point where he ended the concert with a song called Miss Otis Regrets She's Unable to Lunch Today, which is that's straight up a ballad about murder. You know, like, he was throwing such shade at the audience. It was really, really amazing.
Is that where you got the idea to do that tune on?
Oh, that was well before. Like, this thing at Carnegie was like 3 years ago.
Okay.
But no, Miss Otis Regrets. I don't even remember how I learned that song. It's weird.
Yeah. You know what that made me think of is there's a Keith's interview as part of the Miles documentary. He said Miles came to him one day and said, "Do you know why I don't play ballads anymore?" And he said, "Why?" He said, "Because I love ballads too much." And he said, and it occurred to me that he'd rather play something bad than play something he played before. Because Keith had gone to hear the group he was working with, and he didn't think that it was, happening on Miles' level. And so he said that he had this conversation
That's
with
a very
him. So
interesting
that
story.
kind of brought that to mind.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Wow. He just didn't want to play anything he played before. So that must have been in Keith's head about his own path.
I think he's always sort of been one like that. And so Keith is an interesting one. I especially, in doing your homework on Keith, you start to realize who his influences are as well, and that he doesn't come out of a vacuum, like Keith. I mean, this is an oversimplified recipe, but it's like the history of piano playing is one part, and like sort of Western music and a lot of jazz. There's a lot of Paul Bley in there. There is a lot of Paul Bley and Keith Jarrett. And Keith gives it up, but I don't know if he gives it up quite as much as he could have. And then also this guy, John Coates Jr. from Delaware Water Gap, right? Yeah. Who was a guy that Keith listened to coming up, and sort of the distinctive kind of gospel-y kind of stuff that Keith gets into, you actually hear a little bit of a reference point for that as well.
Who didn't record much.
He didn't
I
record
have one
much.
vinyl
Yeah,
album by him.
Yep.
And he also played vibes.
I didn't know that he played vibes. Wow.
Yeah. There's a pianist who settled in Philly. A lot of sort of guys from my generation studied with, named Bernard Payfair.
Okay.
Johnny Coates played vibes on one of Bernard's.
Oh, really?
They sounded great.
Wow.
Yeah, great guys playing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I have a question that I ask some people that's kind of related to this. I saw a TV show probably in I'm trying to think of when this would have been, maybe late 70s. There used to be a late night show called Tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, it was Tom Snyder was
Okay.
the interviewer, and he had Chick and Herbie on. And Chick was on there specifically to talk about the influence of Scientology on his artistic output, and Herbie about Buddhism.
Right.
And because people's worldviews have influenced their music in ways they sometimes talk about, sometimes don't, but whether it's John Cage and Buddhism, or Oliver Messiaen and Christian mysticism, or whatever it is that has helped to shape their art, I like to ask guests that we have what their view is about the influence of their worldview on their music.
It's an interesting question. I think that I'm interested in kind of all sorts of things, and I read all sorts of, I should say I have read a lot of books on different, esoteric teachings, of different, done a little bit of the reading on mystic Christianity and all those different types of things like that as well. That right now, mostly I'm fascinated with the fact that there's anything at all in the world as opposed to nothing. That's kind of remarkable. And so I try to keep it, and this world is messed up in many ways and fundamentally imperfect. But there's something here, and I guess my view is that this is I kind of feel like this is a learning planet. This is a planet that we come to work some stuff out. Like, I don't know, and I don't have any idea about, I don't really know or particularly care about, an immortal soul or whatever. I just think that as, consciousness is definitely, I'm convinced that consciousness is much stranger and also more common in the universe than we think, and not in the terms of ooh, crazy ETs out there, but in the sense of consciousness being a fundamental property of the universe, and I think that sort of embracing, the idea of it being, this is a place where we learn, and embracing the imperfection in it, and that definitely, in terms of how it shows up in my music, I definitely try to come towards that. I want to try to do my best to make something beautiful, and I also know that there's going to be flaws in it, and I accept and treasure those, and I try to do the same thing with the world in general, while at the same time, that doesn't mean that you just accept everything as it is because, oh, well, this is just you try to change the shit that needs to be changed. But also, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm rambling
that's a
a little
great,
bit.
That's a great answer. I was listening to Invisible Cinema, the Praise, on the way up, and I thought I have to ask him that.
No,
question.
yeah.
So I didn't know if that composition.
Yeah, it doesn't come from, I've explored a lot of different things. Buddhism is kind of the closest thing. I'd say Sufism and just straight up absurdism, I think. I sort of kind of relate to all of those things. Okay.
So. We were talking in class the other day about your approach to composition. It's kind of interesting to listen to the Mary McPartland interview and then listening to Arborescence and some of the later things. And I had recently watched a documentary about a woman named Carmen Herrera. I don't know if that name is familiar.
It is familiar.
Or not, but she's an artist, a minimalist,
Mm-hmm.
who received no recognition whatsoever until she was about 90 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody discovered her, and when they did the documentary, I think she was around 100.
Wow.
So she had a career by that time of 10 years of success.
Oh my God.
Of major exhibitions, and she said something that her approach was, once she felt her painting was finished exactly where she wanted it, she took something away. And there was never a case where it didn't make it better.
Interesting.
And so I was wondering, just kind of in terms of conceptually.
You've given me something to think about there. That's very interesting.
Well, conceptually, how are you evolving in terms of what you're doing compositionally? And is there a move to more economy or more in that direction?
The answer is that I can't commit to having one point of view. Like, I think that there are some songs that are, every song has its own story to me, and I need to try to understand what the point of it is, what it's trying to say, or I guess what I'm trying to say with it. A lot of the time it feels like finding out what the song itself wants to be. And then definitely stripping things away can play a role. I mean, the song that I just played for you, right? The one that I'm just working on, that's very stripped down. You know, it's mostly an ostinato, but with quite rigorously controlled elements of the melody. And I have a thing that I'm always looking for in music with it, which is what I call like imperfect symmetry. As in a composition, when it feels balanced, but not with the same elements, like it feels balanced, but not. It's hard to exactly put into words. I can just feel it when I feel like I'm getting close to it. I'm always looking for that almost all the time in almost every tune of mine. Some kind of imperfect symmetry is key. But so some of the songs are very stripped down. A lot of my other songs right now, so that's a song that I'm writing for my band Little Big, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the band which we're playing kind of more, I don't know what you call it, song-based, like influences from alternative music and electronic, and just all sorts of different things. But the harmonic palette of that band tends towards the simpler. For other projects of mine, I'm writing like lush jazz chord. I mean, I hate the word jazz, but lush chords. That just that like really have that open up a whole other story. And I'm writing music for like a front line with trumpet and tenor, and so I don't think I'd be able to say that my composition is in any way like starting to coalesce around one theme, but I am trying to become a little bit better at letting each tune just get to the point of what it has to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said what's the term that you were, symmetry?
Imperfect symmetry.
Imperfect symmetry, and you said you can tell when you're getting close to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this reminds me of something that like what you were saying about, remind me,
Herrera.
Herrera, yeah. When she feels like she's getting close, she'll take something away. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of something that I think about when I practice, and especially if I practice something technical. My philosophy, I don't know why this is, but my philosophy has always been to practice something until I can almost play it. And then to stop. Like, because I don't ever want it to become mechanical. So I always get it almost to where I'm able to do it without thinking, and then
That's interesting.
stop.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like that's and people have different philosophies about that. I mean, it definitely makes it so that on a technical level, I make a lot of mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, but I feel involved all the time. Or not all the time, but a little bit more maybe.
That's a great perspective, and kind of counterbalances the sort of the Kenny Werner practice something until you can do your taxes while you're playing it.
Right. I mean, everyone has their own
Yeah.
perspective on it, and that, it's just a matter of try things out and see what actually feels good to you,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really great. Any questions from up there? Do you guys have any things that have popped into your mind that you'd like to follow up on, or yeah?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, do you listen to classical music like Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky?
I've
Will it influence your composition and playing?
definitely. I haven't listened to a ton of Rachmaninoff, at least in many years. I listened to a fair amount of Scriabin. I like.
We have analyzed some Scriabin. They've written some pieces based on our
cool.
analysis. Scriabin's a favorite of mine too.
Yeah, I like Scriabin. I like Bartók is just magnificent. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever come across the piano rolls. Do you know the Bartók piano rolls?
Of him playing
Of
the
him playing.
Microcosmos and the other
Not
compositions?
Microcosmos, but like some of his like folk songs that he
Yeah.
later arranged for orchestra and things like that.
Yeah.
It's just the piano rolls of him playing it.
Okay.
That stuff is swinging. I'm telling you, like the way that he is playing, his rhythm is insane, and it is definitely not exactly what is on the page. It has, it's like you're
Yeah,
like,
I have a recording of him playing the dance in Bulgarian rhythm, which I
Right.
think is from Book 6.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that's part of it, I think.
yeah.
So I mean, Bartók and so orchestral music like that. Bach. I mean, I've got my things that Tchaikovsky. Actually, Ben Street a few months ago, the great bass player Ben Street, told me that I should take a moment and listen to Tchaikovsky by a river, and I haven't done that yet. So I need to do that. So thanks for the
So
reminder.
I'm curious about your thoughts on Scriabin,
Yeah.
because he crossed over. The later things are very contemporary,
Sure.
20th century sound.
Yeah.
And some of the early things are almost Chopin-esque.
Totally. I mean, the fact is that I don't know much about classical music. I listen to things and I soak it up and I get ideas. I personally haven't spent a ton of time analyzing because I'm also just not a very, for one, it's not really my personality and hasn't been my particular process. And also I'm just a very bad reader. Like I'm not good at reading lots of notes. I'll do it every once in a while. Like I've tried to put in some time. The Berg Piano Sonata Number 2? No, it's Number 1. Number 1, the first piano sonata by Alban Berg, where he was like trying to do the 12-tone approaches, but in a very romantic kind of way. That's a remarkable piece of music that I spent a lot of time trying to learn how to play, like the first 3 pages of. But in general, I actually put it on as music to enjoy, to just put on and dream with it and let it sort of influence me, not exactly subliminally, but like more, because I'm listening to it, but just let it sort of enter the fabric of my life, you know?
Yeah.
That's been typically my approach with most of that, Bach is an exception. I've spent some time with, playing well-tempered clavier. I've spent some time trying to play a few Debussy pieces. And that and the Berg is the extent of like pretty much what I've played on with classical piano.
That's a lot going on there.
Wow.
How about Messiaen? We have a student that's working on a Messiaen, and there's some Messiaen piano pieces, Isle of Fire and things that I can look at the way he used the topography of the piano with the white and black notes. Reminds me of Cecil Taylor.
Totally. I mean, Messiaen is really remarkable, and just for me, I tend to respond to things emotionally, I guess, and it just puts me in. It puts me in like this sort of floating, mysterious mood that I in a way that I dig, and you don't need drugs to get there, you know? You know, it reminds, it's in that similar, like, who am I thinking of? There's another one, Henry Dutilleux, and the interesting piano pieces he wrote that his wife, Genevieve Joy, she performed, also in that sort of hovering, like almost levitating French impressionistic kind of music. Messiaen stuff with bird calls is amazing, you know? And but I am hardly any expert. I mean, I dabble in listening to these things. I can't by any means say that I've checked out his entire, like, you know, catalog of works. I've got the stuff that I love. I listen to a lot of different things, a lot of new music, and I listen to the things that I really love at times. I don't know, I've spent time at different points in my life with some of those things. I can't say that I've consciously, you know, another person that I spent a lot of time with and didn't try to analyze at all, Toru Takemitsu.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Toru Takemitsu's music. Morton Feldman's music. You know, you put on a piece of Morton Feldman like Rothko Chapel, and you just let that happen to you for 25 minutes, and you're going to come out of the other side of that experience a different human being than you were when you came in, you know? And you might be that your experience is filled with rage, like, why did this guy say I should listen to that? But it also might be, wow, that was really beautiful, you know? I don't know.
Do you have perfect pitch?
No.
Because all these influences seem to find their way into your playing, you know, so I don't know whether bypassing the analysis part of it, you're getting the inspiration.
I'm getting the inspiration. I get sounds in my ear that I'm like, I like what that is. It's not like I'm trying to, you know, it's not that I'm trying to, and there's nothing wrong with transcribing and analyzing. That's the thing, you know. It's not to say that by any means. It's just to say that if I said that that was what I was doing, I would be lying, because that's just not my process.
Well, I feel like we definitely got to know you.
Okay.
I appreciate you opening up about all these things. I mean, it's tremendously valuable.
No.
You know, I can't overstate that.
Are there any more questions, like a couple, just one or two more before you guys play? Or
well, you know what? Maybe the guys who are playing can start coming down, and anybody else who's up there, why don't you throw some more questions
You guys are
down.
all the quiet ones. I thought I had a suspicion.
Eric,
there's
why
one.
don't you guys
How have you dealt with roadblocks in your practice?
With what's that?
How have you dealt with roadblocks in your practice?
Roadblocks in practicing. That's a very good question. I mean, for me, when I find that I'm getting stuck, a lot of the time, I mean, the roadblocks that I tend to have are roadblocks of like focus and concentration. If I notice that I'm practicing, but my attention isn't really there, I'll try to stop myself, and try to make a habit of not practicing unless I'm actually present. If I just find that I'm drifting off and just going through the motions, I'm almost better off stopping and doing something else completely different than practicing something just mechanically, you know? As far as specific roadblocks in my playing, I try to examine them, like just be, I make a lot of, I think of like roadblocks in my playing more than roadblocks in my practicing. That's like, if I'm encountering something that feels like I just can't get there, I'm gonna try to think about that. And a lot of the time it has to do with what I'm listening to. Like, I'm still in a period right now. Right now, I've developed a something of a voice linearly. Like, I have a natural kind of linear flow when I improvise. My harmonic support for that linear flow isn't where I want it to be yet. And so that's one of the things that I'm examining within myself right now. And I'm thinking, like, the way that I'm working on it right now is mostly by keeping it as something that I care about. There's an exercise that Ron Carter has his students do, and I only know this because I have some friends who studied with Ron, and I would hate to get the exact details of what he would say wrong, but it's to basically write down 10 things that are important to you in your playing. 10 things that you want in your playing. And those can be things that you feel like you don't have and you want to add. They can be things that you do have and you want to maintain. And anywhere in between. But I have a list of 10 things in front of my piano. And so if I do get stuck, I can look up at that list right in front of me and be like, oh, what's actually important to me? How can I work on one of those types of things? And then the final thing I'd say, because it's a very good question, if I'm running into a roadblock, like practicing a certain piece of music, or I just feel like I'm running in circles, like I'm playing these changes, but I'm just playing the same way every time, can't get anything going really. I find ways to try to trick myself and take myself out of the zone that I'm in. And one of the best ways to do that is to transpose to a new key. Not transpose, I'm not talking about go up a new key every chorus, like, hey, I'm the king of the jam session, you know? It's not, you know? It's like, it's much more of like, let's take something that's familiar, put it in an unfamiliar context, let's get to know it there. I find that by doing that, you, like, and in addition, I mean, I really wouldn't have, I know that we've got a lot of things that we need to get to, but I have my whole little sort of philosophy of how I think about, you know, rhythm, melody, and harmony. There, you know, we can hopefully touch a little bit on some of that at some point today. And the way that talking about modulation is like kind of key for the working on harmony part, and just for waking your mind up in a different kind of way than it usually might have been involved. So there's a long and
I love the list, the idea of the list,
Mm-hmm.
and it made me wonder, because you have a instantly recognizable musical identity, whether that's a conscious pursuit or whether you think that's something that happens to people.
I think it's something that happens to people. Okay. Like, I think that originality. There's a very interesting essay by one of my favorite poets that I would encourage anyone to just seek out. It's in a book of hers called Nine Gates, and it's an essay called The Question of Originality. And I think that I can't sum it up at all because she says it so much better. But basically, I think that we definitely, as a culture, sometimes especially in the West, we fixate on originality as like a goal to attain to, but originality, like the word origin has like different meanings. There is origin which relates to like fresh newness of like, I forget the exact roots of the words, but that is like a brand new occurring thing, original. But also there's origin as in the source of where something comes from. Like in the sense of a spring which bubbles up water and is constantly renewed. And so she talks about the balancing of original, like finding a little bit more of a balance between that idea of trying to pursue something which is new and cutting edge, like originality is also just authentic presence. You know, that's the way that she puts it. And I feel like, you know, if you're consciously seeking originality, if you don't mind, there's a short story that she says in that she summarizes something from Nietzsche, which is, I think, really remarkable and applies very much to the music education thing. I mean, so I think about when I was in school, and what I always heard was, learn the tradition, but find your own voice, right? And they seem kind of at odds and contradictory in a certain way. And yeah, it's these imperatives of, at least for me when I was coming up, those were the things that, you know, need to be grounded in the history, but you also need to be fresh and new. And they felt like, to me, kind of at war with each other. So in that essay, Jane Hirschfield, she talks about Nietzsche's idea of the artist and the development of the artist going through 3 distinct phases. The first phase is that of the camel, as he describes it, the phase where you learn how things have done. You like enter into the tradition, the oral tradition or whatever it is. You learn how to be a craftsperson, right? You learn the rules, right? A lot of people learn that and they're like, great, I'm an artist now. And they might be. Most likely they're a craftsperson, and that's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But it is a limited worldview because everything that you've found has been inherited and taught to you. But some people stop there. Other people go on to the next phase, which is the phase of the lion. Now this lion, so imagine there's a dragon over here. This is the way that he describes it, as crazy as this sounds. There's a dragon over here, and on every scale of the dragon, there's a commandment saying, thou shalt not. Thou shalt never play a chord with a flat 9 in the inside of the voicing. You know, thou shalt not resolve parallel fifths. You know, all of these rules. The lion totally comes over and just kicks that dragon's ass. Like all those rules are broken. The phase of the lion is the one of like, no, I'm gonna find out for myself. I'm gonna break all the rules. I'm gonna find my own perspective. People get to this phase as well, and they think, now I'm an artist. And they might be, but they're also limited because it can be just as much of a prison to be not allowing, like, creating your own, in running away from the rules, and rejecting them, you close the door on a whole bunch of things as well. And so you don't allow yourself to play something which might be obvious, and maybe the obvious thing could be the best thing. because you're trying to pursue your originality and your own unique thing, and no, I can't do that, somebody else already did that, or whatever it might be, you know? And so it ends up being kind of just as much of a trap. And also, you can't help but be a prisoner of habits in one way or another anyway. So if you make up your own system, you'll fall into your own habits most likely as well. All of this to say then, third stage then that he describes is the stage of the child. And this is the stage where, having learned the rules, having learned how to break the rules, now you operate as if there weren't ever any rules. So you're not fixated on following them, and you're not fixated on breaking them, but you're also not innocent to them. Having gone through the process of learning them and questioning them, then you can come to a holistic place where you actually just create, hopefully in like a simultaneously informed yet like innocent as kind of the word, or pure, I don't know what it is, but it's like, I mean, you get the idea, I think. So that's the way that he describes it as she paraphrases it in the context of something that, honestly, I feel like almost any creative person should read this essay.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah.